sick mother bear that was about to be euthanized begged this human baby to be let into the home. What this baby did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning air carried a somber weight as Wildlife Officer Nathaniel Reed pulled his truck to a stop on the edge of Pine Hollow. The small town nestled against the looming forests of Black Ridge Mountains had always maintained a delicate balance with the wildlife that surrounded it. This morning, that balance was in jeopardy. Nathaniel stepped out of his vehicle and adjusted his cap, his weathered face lined with concern as he met the gaze of his colleague, Dr. Isabella Winters. "It's just over there." Isabella pointed toward a cluster of trees behind the Cooper family's cottage. "The mother bear is in bad shape, Nate. I've never seen anything like it. She can barely stand. Her coat is falling out in patches, and there's a severe infection spreading through her body." The radio on Nathaniel's belt crackled with the voice of their supervisor. "Team Alpha, confirm your position. Has visual contact been established with the target animal? Remember, public safety is our priority." Nathaniel pressed the talk button. "Affirmative. We're at the Cooper property line. Dr. Winters is preparing the euthanasia kit now." He released the button and sighed heavily. "I hate this part of the job." Inside the quaint blue cottage with white trim, 9-month-old Lily Cooper sat in her playpen near the large bay window. Her tiny fingers gripped colorful blocks, occasionally bringing them to her mouth to taste their smooth surfaces. Her mother, Olivia Cooper, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, the sizzle of eggs in the pan and the rich aroma of coffee filling the home with morning comfort. "Mama's just making some eggs, sweetie," Olivia called to her daughter, unaware of the unfolding drama at the edge of their property. She glanced at the kitchen clock. Her husband, Marcus, would be back from his early morning jog soon. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust particles that danced in the air and casting a golden glow over Lily's wispy blonde curls. Outside, Nathaniel and Isabella moved cautiously through the underbrush. They carried tranquilizer guns and the euthanasia kit, a grim necessity for what they both knew had to be done. The mother bear posed too great a risk to the community, and her suffering was evident in every labored breath she took. "There she is," Isabella whispered, pointing to a dark shape huddled under a large pine tree. The bear's once glossy black coat was now dull and matted. Open sores dotted her emaciated frame, and her breathing came in ragged, painful gasps. "Poor thing," Nathaniel muttered, raising his tranquilizer gun. "At least we can end her suffering." But as they approached, something unexpected happened. The mother bear, sensing their presence, lifted her head. Her dark eyes, clouded with pain but still alert, fixed on them. And then, to their astonishment, she did not retreat or show aggression. Instead, she struggled to her feet and began limping, not away from them, but toward the Cooper cottage. "What is she doing?" Isabella whispered, her finger hovering near the trigger of her tranquilizer gun. Nathaniel shook his head, puzzled. "I've never seen this behavior before. It's almost like she's seeking help." Inside the cottage, little Lily suddenly stopped playing with her blocks, her head tilted to one side, as if she'd heard something that caught her attention. She dropped her colorful toys and pulled herself up to stand in her playpen, her small hands gripping the edge as she peered out the window. Olivia, still busy in the kitchen, didn't notice her daughter's sudden interest in something outside. "Almost done with breakfast, sweet pea," she called, flipping the eggs in the pan. The mother bear continued her painful journey toward the cottage, each step clearly agonizing. Her eyes remained fixed on the window where Lily stood watching, as if drawn by some invisible force. The wildlife officers followed at a safe distance, weapons ready but hesitant to intervene in this unprecedented behavior. "We should stop her before she gets too close to the house," Isabella urged, raising her tranquilizer gun again. but Nathaniel placed a hand on her arm. "Wait," he said softly. "Just wait a minute. I want to see what she's doing." The bear reached the edge of the Coopers' well-manicured lawn and collapsed, her strength failing her. But even as she lay there, her gaze remained fixed on the window, on little Lily, who stood watching with innocent curiosity. And then, the most extraordinary thing happened. The bear made a soft, plaintive sound, almost like a whimper, that carried across the yard to the cottage. In her playpen, Lily responded with an excited babble, bouncing up and down and pointing toward the window. Her small face lit up with what could only be described as recognition. The morning sun illuminated this strange tableau: the dying mother bear, the curious human baby, and the bewildered wildlife officers, none aware that this encounter was about to change all their lives forever. Olivia finally sensed her daughter's excitement and walked into the living room, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "What's got you all worked up, sunshine?" she asked, with a smile that quickly vanished when she followed Lily's gaze out the window. "Oh my God!" she gasped, rushing to scoop up her daughter. Her heart pounded against her ribcage as she backed away from the window, clutching Lily protectively to her chest. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice rising with panic, but her husband was still out jogging, oblivious to the drama unfolding at their home. Olivia fumbled for her phone on the coffee table, nearly knocking over a framed photo of their family. Marcus, Olivia, Lily, and their beloved golden retriever Max, who had passed away just 3 months ago after 12 loyal years with the family. Outside, the mother bear made another attempt to rise, her muscles trembling with the effort. As she managed to stand, something caught Nathaniel's trained eye, a glint of metal embedded in the bear's side, partially hidden by matted fur and dried blood. "Isabella," he said quietly, lowering his tranquilizer gun. "Look at her right flank. There's something there." Dr. Winters squinted, then her eyes widened. "Is that a trap fragment? No wonder she's in such bad shape. Infection from something like that could cause all these symptoms." The bear took another painful step toward the cottage, then collapsed again with a heart-wrenching moan that seemed almost human in its desperation. As she fell, they noticed something else: 2 tiny forms stirring in the underbrush behind the tree where she had been resting. "Cubs," Isabella breathed, raising her binoculars. 2 of them, maybe 3 weeks old, they're severely malnourished. Nathaniel's radio crackled again. "Team Alpha, status report. Has the target been neutralized?" Before he could respond, the cottage door flew open. Olivia Cooper stood there, still holding Lily, her face a mask of fear and confusion. "What's happening? Why is there a bear in my yard?" "Mrs. Cooper, please go back inside," Nathaniel called, holding up his hand in a calming gesture. "We're wildlife management. We have the situation under control." But as he spoke, little Lily began to squirm in her mother's arms, reaching out toward the fallen bear with insistent cries. "Bah! Bah!" she babbled, her tiny hands opening and closing as if trying to grasp something just beyond her reach. "Lily, no," Olivia whispered, struggling to hold on to her suddenly animated daughter. "That's dangerous, baby." Inside Olivia's mind, memories from just 3 months ago resurfaced with painful clarity. Max, their golden retriever, had been Lily's constant companion from the day they brought her home from the hospital. The elderly dog had watched over the baby with devoted attention, sleeping beside her crib and gently licking her tiny feet whenever they were within reach. When Max passed away, Lily had cried for days, looking for him in every corner of the house, calling "Bah, Bah," her baby talk for the beloved family pet. Now, here she was, making the same sound, reaching for a wild bear with the same recognition in her eyes. "Mrs. Cooper, please." Isabella urged, taking a cautious step forward. "That animal is very sick. We need to—" She was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Marcus Cooper appeared around the side of the house, his morning jog cut short by the sight of wildlife officers with weapons on his property. His tall frame was tense, his dark hair damp with sweat as he sprinted to his wife and daughter. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, positioning himself in front of Olivia and Lily. "Sir, we're handling a sick wild animal," Nathaniel explained, trying to keep his voice steady and professional despite the increasingly complicated situation. "That bear is suffering from a severe infection and poses a risk to your family. We need to euthanize it humanely." Upon hearing the word euthanize, Lily began to cry in earnest, as if she understood the meaning behind the unfamiliar word. Her sobs were so sudden and so intense that everyone, even the wildlife officers, were momentarily stunned into silence. In that moment of shared shock, no one noticed the subtle change in the mother bear's demeanor. Though still weak and clearly in pain, her eyes had focused on the source of the crying, little Lily, and something akin to recognition flickered in their depths. With tremendous effort, the bear dragged herself a few more feet toward the family, leaving a faint trail of blood on the perfectly trimmed grass. Instead of showing any aggression, she lowered her head to the ground in a gesture that seemed almost supplicating. "My God," Dr. Winters murmured, lowering her tranquilizer gun completely. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this." Marcus, his initial anger giving way to bewilderment, looked from the bear to his still crying daughter. "What does it want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a new sound joined the chorus of confusion, the weak, hungry cries of the bear cubs now visible at the edge of the forest. Their tiny bodies trembled with each pitiful wail, their eyes not yet fully open, their fur still soft and new. "They're starving," Isabella said, her professional detachment crumbling in the face of such obvious suffering. "She can't hunt or forage with that injury, and she can't produce enough milk to feed them." Lily's cries suddenly stopped. The baby hiccuped once, twice, then pointed insistently at the bear while looking directly into her mother's eyes. "Bah," she said again, but this time with such clarity and purpose that it sent a shiver down Olivia's spine. "This is crazy," Marcus muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We need to go inside and let these officers do their job." But Olivia didn't move. She was staring at the bear with a strange expression on her face. "Marcus," she said slowly, "remember how Max used to sleep under the oak tree in the backyard? How he'd dig a little hollow in the dirt to keep cool in the summer?" Marcus frowned, not understanding the connection. "What does that have to do with—" "Look at her neck," Olivia interrupted, pointing with her free hand. "That patch of lighter fur shaped like a crescent moon." Everyone's eyes turned to the bear. Sure enough, there was a distinctive patch of lighter fur at the base of her neck, standing out against her dark coat like a pale fingernail against dark soil. "Our property backs up to the conservation area," Olivia continued, her voice gaining strength. 2 years ago, before Lily was born, we used to see a young female bear with that same marking. Remember? The rangers told us she was about 3 years old, just establishing her territory. She never bothered us, just passed through occasionally. Marcus's eyes widened as the memory clicked into place. The rangers called her Moonshine because of that mark. But Liv, that doesn't mean— "She recognized our home," Olivia said firmly. "She came here deliberately. She's asking for help." As if to confirm her words, the bear, Moonshine, made a soft huffing sound, and again lowered her head in that strangely submissive posture. Nathaniel and Isabella exchanged glances, their training and protocols at odds with the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. The radio at Nathaniel's hip crackled impatiently, but he made no move to answer it. In the momentary silence that followed, a new sound emerged, the distant rumble of an approaching vehicle. Through the trees, they could see a large white van making its way up the winding road toward the Cooper property. The side of the van bore the logo of the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. "Did you call for backup?" Isabella asked Nathaniel, frowning in confusion. He shook his head. "Not yet. I was about to, but—" The van pulled up beside Nathaniel's truck, and the driver's door opened to reveal a tall woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the renowned wildlife veterinarian and director of the Rehabilitation Center, stepped out and surveyed the scene with sharp, assessing eyes. "I received an anonymous call," she announced, walking briskly toward them. "Someone reported a bear with cubs in distress at this location." Her gaze fell on Moonshine, and her step faltered momentarily. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured, all professional distance gone from her voice. As Dr. Reeves approached, Moonshine's posture changed. She lifted her head, nostrils flaring as she caught the woman's scent. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she made a soft chuffing sound, a sound of recognition. Dr. Reeves stopped in her tracks. "It can't be," she whispered, her face draining of color. "It's not possible." "You know this bear?" Nathaniel asked, bewildered by this new development. Dr. Reeves nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the injured animal. 3 years ago, we rescued an orphaned bear cub after her mother was killed by poachers. We rehabilitated her and released her into this conservation area." She gestured to the marking on the bear's neck. "We called her Moonshine because of that crescent mark. It's a genetic anomaly completely unique to her." "That's her," Olivia confirmed, shifting Lily in her arms. "That's the bear we used to see. But that doesn't explain why she came here, to your home specifically," Isabella pointed out. Dr. Reeves knelt down, still maintaining a safe distance from the injured bear. "Actually, it might. The rehabilitation center where we treated her is just a few miles from here. We kept her in a large outdoor enclosure during her recovery. She would have associated human structures with safety and care." She looked up at the Coopers. "And if she's been passing through your property regularly, she may see this place as part of her territory, somewhere familiar and safe." Little Lily had gone quiet, watching the proceedings with solemn eyes that seemed too understanding for one so young. She leaned forward in her mother's arms, pointing again at Moonshine. "Bah," she insisted, then looked toward the forest edge where the cubs were still crying weakly. "Bobbies," she said, surprising everyone with her clarity. "Did she just say babies?" Marcus asked, amazed. "That's a new word." Olivia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "She's trying to tell us something. She understands." Dr. Reeves stood up, decision made. "I'm going to try to help her." She turned to Nathaniel and Isabella. "I know the protocol calls for euthanasia in cases like this, but if that's a trap wound, we might be able to treat it. And those cubs still have a chance if we can save their mother." Nathaniel hesitated, his duty warring with his compassion. "Our orders—" "To hell with your orders," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "That bear came to us for help. She trusted us enough to bring her babies here. We can't just kill her." Isabella looked at the family. Marcus, standing protectively beside Olivia, who cradled Lily in her arms, then at Moonshine, who despite her pain and weakness had managed to drag herself to this particular home, to these particular people. It defied explanation, and yet the evidence was right in front of them. "Nate," she said softly. I think we need to make an exception here. Before Nathaniel could respond, his radio crackled again, this time with a different voice, that of Park Ranger Samuel Hodges, the regional supervisor. Team Alpha, we've received reports of illegal traps in the conservation area. If that's the case with your target animal, Recovery Protocol 5B applies. Stand by for veterinary support. Nathaniel picked up his radio. Copy that, sir. Dr. Reeves is already on site. He looked at Isabella, relief evident in his eyes. Recovery Protocol 5B meant they could attempt rehabilitation instead of euthanasia if the animal's condition was caused by human interference, like an illegal trap. Dr. Reeves was already moving back to her van, calling over her shoulder, I need to sedate her to examine that wound properly. Can you help me? She asked Nathaniel and Isabella. As the wildlife officers moved to assist, little Lily began squirming again in her mother's arms. Down, she demanded, a word she had mastered weeks ago and used frequently. No, sweetie, Olivia said firmly. You need to stay with Mommy right now. But Lily was insistent, her small face scrunched up with determination. Please, she added, employing another recent addition to her vocabulary, one that usually melted her parents' resolve. Marcus and Olivia exchanged glances, years of marriage allowing them to communicate volumes without words. This was dangerous, unprecedented, and yet something extraordinary was happening. Something neither of them fully understood, but both could feel. Just hold her hand tightly, Marcus finally said. Don't let her get too close. Olivia nodded and slowly lowered Lily to the ground, keeping a firm grip on her tiny hand. The moment her feet touched the grass, Lily began totting forward with surprising steadiness for a child who had only been walking independently for a few weeks. Dr. Reeves, preparing a sedative, looked up in alarm. Mrs. Cooper, please keep your child back. The bear is wild and in pain. She could be unpredictable. But Moonshine hadn't moved. Her dark eyes were fixed on the approaching child with what could only be described as gentleness, the same look she directed at her own cubs. There was no hint of aggression, no tensing of muscles that might indicate a threat. Olivia kept a tight hold on Lily's hand, ready to snatch her up at the first sign of danger. But something in the bear's demeanor made her hesitate to pull her daughter away immediately. Lily stopped a few feet from Moonshine, as far as her mother's restraining hand would allow her to go. She pointed at the bear's wound and made a sad sound. "Owie," she said, another word she had learned when she took her first tumbling steps and scraped her knee. Moonshine made a soft huffing sound in response, her eyes never leaving the child's face. Then, with agonizing slowness, she stretched out her neck and gently laid her head on the grass, as if offering herself to the tiny human's judgment. A collective gasp went up from the adults watching. Even Dr. Reeves, with decades of experience with wild animals, seemed stunned by this display of trust. It's as if, she began, then shook her head, unable to find words for what they were witnessing. It's as if she knows. Olivia finished for her, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Somehow, she knows Lily would understand. Lily looked back at her mother, her small face serious. Help, Ba, she said with childish determination. Then she turned back to Moonshine, and before anyone could stop her, reached out her free hand toward the bear's crescent marking. Lily! Marcus cried out in alarm, taking an instinctive step forward. But it was too late. Lily's small fingers lightly touched the bear's fur, stroking the crescent moon pattern with the same gentle motion she had used to pet Max during his final days. Moonshine didn't flinch. She didn't growl. She simply closed her eyes, as if accepting comfort from the only being pure enough to offer it without fear or reservation. In that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere around them, a tension breaking, a connection forming that transcended the natural order and spoke to something more ancient, more fundamental than the divisions between human and wild. "Well, I'll be damned," Nathaniel whispered, lowering his tranquilizer gun completely. Dr. Reeves recovered her professional composure first. "We need to move quickly," she said, though her voice was not quite steady. "That wound needs immediate attention, and those cubs need nourishment." As if on cue, the cubs' cries grew more insistent from the forest edge. Moonshine's eyes opened at the sound, distress evident in her gaze. She tried to rise again, but lacked the strength. "Bobbies," Lily repeated, looking toward the sounds with concern that mirrored the mother bears. Dr. Reeves approached carefully with the sedative prepared. "Mrs. Cooper, please take your daughter back now. I need to sedate Moonshine to treat her." Olivia gently pulled Lily away, lifting her into her arms despite the child's protests. "The nice doctor is going to help Moonshine and her babies," she explained softly. "We need to let her work." To everyone's surprise, Lily stopped struggling and nodded solemnly, as if she understood perfectly. She watched with intense focus as Dr. Reeves administered the sedative to Moonshine, who accepted the needle without resistance, something virtually unheard of in a wild animal. Within minutes, Moonshine's eyes drooped, and she slipped into unconsciousness. Dr. Reeves immediately began examining the wound in her side, confirming what they had suspected. A metal fragment from an illegal trap was deeply embedded in her flesh, causing the severe infection that had nearly claimed her life. "This is going to require surgery," Dr. Reeves announced, straightening up. "And those cubs need immediate care. They're severely dehydrated and malnourished." Isabella had already moved to the forest edge and was carefully gathering the tiny cubs into a specially designed transport container. Their pitiful cries tore at everyone's hearts, but especially little Lily's, who buried her face in her mother's shoulder, unable to bear their distress. "We'll take them all to the Rehabilitation Center," Dr. Reeves continued, directing Nathaniel to help prepare Moonshine for transport. "The cubs can be bottle-fed until their mother recovers enough to nurse them again." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process everything that had happened. I don't even know what to call this." "A miracle," Olivia suggested softly, bouncing Lily gently in her arms as the child continued to watch the proceedings with solemn attention. As they carefully loaded the sedated bear onto a stretcher and carried her toward the van, Lily suddenly reached out her arms toward Dr. Reeves. "Go," she said insistently. "Go help Ba." Olivia and Marcus exchanged another look, this one filled with wonder and uncertainty. "Sweetie, we can't go with them," Olivia tried to explain. "Moonshine and her babies need special doctors." But Lily was adamant, her little face crumpling with determination that threatened to become a full-blown tantrum. "Help Ba," she insisted, her voice rising. Dr. Reeves paused, stretcher in hand, and looked thoughtfully at the family. "Actually," she said slowly, "I could use some extra hands at the center. And—" she hesitated, then continued, "I've never seen anything like what happened here today. The connection between your daughter and this bear, it's unprecedented." "You want us to come with you?" Marcus asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "To a wildlife rehabilitation center? With our baby?" Dr. Reeves nodded. "Just for a while, just to see if—" She trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate exactly what she was hoping for. "It could be important," she finished simply. Isabella, returning with the container of cubs, added her voice to Dr. Reeves. "I think you should go," she said, looking at little Lily with wondering eyes. What happened here wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. It was something else. Nathaniel, who had remained largely silent throughout the later developments, finally spoke up. In 23 years of wildlife management, I've never seen an animal, especially a predator like a bear, behave the way Moonshine did with your daughter. Something drew her here, to your home specifically. Don't I want to know what? Lily was still reaching toward the van, her small face set in lines of determination that would have been comical under other circumstances. "Help Ba," she repeated, more softly now, but no less insistently. Olivia looked at her husband, a silent question in her eyes. Marcus hesitated, then gave a small nod. "All right," Olivia said, turning back to Dr. Reeves. "We'll come, but just for a little while." Relief washed over Dr. Reeves' face. "Thank you. Now, we need to move quickly. Every minute counts for Moonshine and her cubs." As they prepared to follow the wildlife van in their own car, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold into something unknown. She looked down at Lily, now contentedly watching the activity from the safety of her mother's arms, and wondered what her daughter could see that the rest of them couldn't. What had drawn Moonshine to their home in her hour of greatest need? And how had Lily known exactly what the bear wanted, even before the adults had figured it out? Behind them, in the dappled shade of the forest, a shaft of sunlight broke through the canopy and illuminated the spot where Moonshine had first appeared. The same spot where, years ago, their golden retriever Max had loved to rest during his final months. The connection was there, just beyond understanding, like a word on the tip of the tongue, or a melody half remembered from childhood. As Marcus started the car, Lily turned in her car seat to look out the window at their home receding in the distance. "Pa," she whispered one more time, pressing her small hand against the glass as if reaching for something visible only to her innocent eyes. And somewhere in the space between worlds, the human and the wild, the known and the mysterious, a bridge had been built, its foundations laid by the trust of a dying mother bear and the compassion of a human child too young to know that such connections were supposed to be impossible. The 20-minute drive to the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center passed in tense silence. Olivia sat in the back beside Lily's car seat, watching her daughter with a mixture of wonder and concern. The child had fallen into an unusual stillness, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if she could see through the miles to where Moonshine was being transported. Occasionally, her small lips would move in silent communication with someone or something unseen. "She's never this quiet in the car," Marcus observed, glancing in the rearview mirror. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, betraying his anxiety despite his outwardly calm demeanor. "Usually she's babbling or singing or asking for snacks." Olivia nodded, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "It's like she's listening to something." As they crested a hill, the Rehabilitation Center came into view, a sprawling complex of low buildings nestled into the landscape, deliberately designed to blend with the natural surroundings. Solar panels gleamed on the rooftops, and carefully tended native gardens surrounded the parking areas. A tasteful sign welcomed visitors. Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, healing nature's children. Dr. Reeves's van had already arrived, and a flurry of activity surrounded the back doors as staff in green scrubs helped unload the sedated Moonshine onto a gurney. Another team member carried the container with the cubs, moving swiftly toward a separate building marked nursery. Marcus parked in a visitor space, and Olivia unbuckled Lily from her car seat. The moment she was free, Lily pointed urgently toward the building where Moonshine was being wheeled. "Bah," she insisted, her voice taking on a tone of command that seemed impossible for one so young. "She's going into surgery, sweetie," Olivia tried to explain, settling Lily on her hip. "We can't go with her right now." But as they approached the main entrance, they were met by a young woman in scrubs with a clipboard. Her name tag identified her as Maya Chen, veterinary assistant. "Mr. and Mrs. Cooper?" she inquired. When they nodded, she continued, "Doctor, Reeves asked me to meet you. She's preparing for surgery now, but she wanted me to bring you to the observation room." Marcus frowned. "Observation room? I don't understand." "It's highly unusual," Maya admitted, leading them through the reception area and down a hallway lined with educational displays about local wildlife. Normally, family members aren't allowed to observe wildlife surgeries, but Dr. Reeves was very specific. She swiped a keycard at a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," holding it open for the family to enter. "She said the bear's response to your daughter was unprecedented, and she wants to document every aspect of this case." The observation room was small but comfortable, with a row of chairs facing a large window that looked down into a state-of-the-art surgical suite. Below, Dr. Reeves and 3 other green-gowned figures were bustling around Moonshine, who lay unconscious on a large stainless steel table. Monitors displayed her vital signs, and bright surgical lights illuminated her wound. "You can sit here," Maya indicated the chairs. "There's a microphone and speaker system if Dr. Reeves needs to communicate with you. I'll be right outside if you need anything." As Maya left, closing the door behind her, Lily suddenly became animated again. "Bah!" she exclaimed, pointing at Moonshine through the glass. She squirmed in Olivia's arms, clearly wanting to get closer. Cautiously, Olivia carried her daughter to the window. "See? The doctors are helping Moonshine," she explained gently. "They're going to make her better." Below, Dr. Reeves glanced up at the observation window and gave a quick nod of acknowledgement before returning her attention to the surgery. They had already opened the area around the wound, and Olivia quickly turned Lily away from the graphic scene. But Lily was insistent, twisting in her mother's arms to see. To Olivia's surprise, her daughter showed no distress at the sight of the surgery, only intense focus, as if she understood exactly what was happening. "Bobbies?" Lily asked, looking around the room as if expecting to see the cubs. "The babies are in another room," Marcus explained, joining them at the window. "They're being taken care of too." A soft knocking at the door preceded Maya's return. "Doctor, Reeves thought you might want to see the cubs while Moonshine is in surgery," she offered. "They're being examined and fed in the nursery." Lily's face lit up at this suggestion. "Babbies," she repeated, reaching toward the door. Marcus and Olivia exchanged glances. "I think that's a yes," Marcus said with a small smile, the first he'd managed since this extraordinary day began. Maya led them through another series of hallways to a different wing of the center. This area was noticeably quieter, with soft lighting and walls painted in soothing colors. Through a window, they could see several incubator-like units and warming tables, where various baby animals were being tended by staff in different colored scrubs. "This is our nursery," Maya explained, her voice automatically lowering in the hushed environment. "We care for orphaned and abandoned wildlife here until they're strong enough to be returned to their mothers or raised for eventual release." She led them to a small anteroom with a sink and supplies for hand washing. "If you're going to enter the nursery, you'll need to sanitize. Young animals are very vulnerable to human germs." As they carefully washed their hands and donned the provided paper gowns, Marcus asked, "Is this normal procedure? Letting visitors into the nursery?" Maya hesitated, squirting hand sanitizer onto Lily's tiny palms and helping her rub it in. "Not exactly," she admitted. "But Dr. Reeves left very specific instructions about your family." She said. Maya paused, seemingly unsure whether to continue. "What did she say?" Olivia prompted gently. Maya glanced at Lily, who was patiently allowing her hands to be sanitized, another unusual behavior for a child her age. "She said your daughter has a gift, and we should observe and document any interactions with the cubs." Before either parent could respond to this bewildering statement, Maya ushered them through another door into the nursery proper. The room was warm and smelled of milk and clean bedding. Various sounds filled the air, the chirping of baby birds, the soft mewling of fawn, and, from a corner station, the distinctive whimpering of bear cubs. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and a salt-and-pepper beard looked up from where he was feeding a cub with a specialized bottle. His name tag read, Gerald Blackwood, Wildlife Nursery Manager. "Ah, you must be the Cooper family," he said, his deep voice warm with welcome. Dr. Reeves radioed ahead. "Come, meet our newest residents." Gerald led them to a warming station where 3 tiny bear cubs lay in a soft-lined container. 2 were nursing from bottles held by a young assistant, while the third, noticeably smaller than its siblings, lay to one side, its breathing rapid and shallow. "The 2 larger cubs are responding well to the formula," Gerald explained, his expression growing somber as he looked at the smallest cub. "But this little one is struggling. She's severely dehydrated and may have an underlying infection. We've started antibiotics, but—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. "What will happen to them if—" Marcus began, then glanced at Lily and rephrased. "What's the long-term plan?" Gerald sighed. "Ideally, if we can save Moonshine, we'll reintroduce the cubs to her as soon as she's strong enough to care for them. If not," he shook his head, "hand-raised predators have a much lower survival rate when released. It's difficult to teach them proper hunting and foraging behaviors without a parent." Throughout this conversation, Lily had been watching the cubs intently. Now she pointed directly at the smallest one. "Sick," she said definitively. "Like Ba." The adults all turned to look at her, surprised by her assessment. "Yes, she is sick," Gerald confirmed, bending slightly to address Lily at her level, a natural with children as well as animals. "We're trying to help her." Lily frowned, her small brow furrowing with concentration. She looked at her mother and made a familiar tugging motion with her hand, the sign she used when she wanted to get down and walk on her own. Olivia hesitated, looking to Gerald for guidance. He nodded. "It's safe. We keep this area very clean, and bear cubs this young pose no threat." Carefully, Olivia set Lily on her feet, keeping a hand on her shoulder. But Lily immediately shrugged off the restraint and wobbled with determination toward the warming station. "Lily, be gentle," Marcus cautioned, moving to intercept her if necessary. But Lily stopped a respectful distance from the container, just watching the cubs. The smallest one gave a weak cry, and to everyone's surprise, Lily mimicked the sound perfectly, a soft, mewling whimper that was eerily accurate. The tiny cub's eyes, still barely open, seemed to seek out the source of the sound. It made the cry again, and again Lily answered, creating a call and response that left the adults staring in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this," Gerald whispered to Maya, who was rapidly taking notes on a tablet. "It's as if they're communicating." After several exchanges, Lily turned to look up at Gerald. With perfect clarity, she said, "Milk different." Gerald blinked in surprise. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily pointed to the bottles being used to feed the larger cubs, then to the smallest cub. "Milk different, she repeated insistently. The nursery manager looked thoughtful. "We're using the same formula for all three," he explained, more to the parents than to Lily. "It's our standard recipe for black bear cubs, adjusted for their age." But Lily shook her head, her expression remarkably adult in its certainty. "Number different." She pointed again at the smallest cub. "Bye-bye special." Gerald exchanged glances with his assistant, then with the Coopers. "Children often have intuitive insights," he said slowly. "And in my 30 years of wildlife rehabilitation, I've learned to listen when something unusual happens." He turned to his assistant. "Sarah, could you prepare a batch of the modified formula we use for cubs with digestive issues? Less lactose, more electrolytes." As Sarah hurried to comply, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. The door opened to reveal Dr. Reeves, still in her surgical gown with a mask pulled down around her neck. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. "The surgery was successful," she announced without preamble. "We removed the trap fragment and cleaned the wound thoroughly. There was significant infection, but not as extensive as I feared. With aggressive antibiotic treatment and proper care, Moonshine has an excellent chance of recovery." Relief washed over the room, but Dr. Reeves wasn't finished. "There's something else," she continued, her voice taking on an odd note. "When we were operating, Moonshine's vital signs began to fluctuate. Her heart rate increased, and her blood pressure dropped. Not unusual during surgery, but concerning. But then, about 15 minutes ago, everything suddenly stabilized. It was as if—" She hesitated, glancing at Lily. "It was as if something reassured her, even under full anesthesia." Maya checked the time on her tablet. "It corresponds almost exactly to when Lily first saw the cubs," she said quietly. A charged silence filled the room as the adults processed this information. Lily, oblivious to their bewilderment, had returned her attention to the cubs. Sarah returned with a new bottle containing a slightly different formula and handed it to Gerald. "Let's try this," he said, approaching the smallest cub. But before he could pick her up, Lily caught his hand. "Me help," she stated firmly. Gerald looked to the parents for permission. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia nodded. "If you can show her how—" With gentle guidance, Gerald showed Lily how to sit on a small stool beside the warming station. He carefully placed the tiny cub in a special feeding position, supporting it with a soft cloth, then helped Lily hold the bottle at the correct angle. "Gentle now," he instructed softly. "Just like feeding a baby doll." To everyone's astonishment, Lily needed no further guidance. She held the bottle with surprising steadiness, murmuring soft, unintelligible words to the cub as it began to suckle, stronger than before. Dr. Reeves watched with intense focus. "Look at the cub's response," she whispered to no one in particular. "I've never seen a critical cub rally so quickly." Indeed, the smallest bear was now nursing enthusiastically from the bottle, its tiny paws kneading the air in contentment. After finishing nearly all the formula, it gave a small hiccup and relaxed into what appeared to be a peaceful sleep, rather than the distressed unconsciousness of before. "Remarkable," Gerald murmured, checking the cub's vital signs with practiced hands. "Her temperature is already more stable." As they watched, the door to the nursery opened again, and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and he wore a tailored suit that seemed at odds with the rustic setting of the Wildlife Center. "Director Harrington," Dr. Reeves said, straightening slightly. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow. When I received your call about this unusual case, I decided to come immediately," Director Harrington replied, his cultured voice carrying the slight lilt of an English accent. He surveyed the scene with keen blue eyes that missed nothing. These must be the Coopers. After introductions were made, Director Harrington observed Lily, who was now gently stroking the sleeping cub's fur with one finger under Gerald's watchful guidance. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "And you say the mother bear specifically approached their home? Even with wildlife officers present?" Dr. Reeves nodded. "It defies conventional explanation, Richard. In all my years of wildlife veterinary practice, I've never seen anything like it." Director Harrington stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Perhaps," he began, then seemed to think better of it. "Mrs. Cooper, might I have a word with you and your husband? In private." Olivia looked reluctant to leave Lily, but Gerald quickly reassured her. "She's doing wonderfully. I'll stay here right with her." In a small consultation room adjacent to the nursery, Director Harrington closed the door and turned to the Coopers with an expression of carefully measured curiosity. "What I'm about to ask may seem unusual," he began, "but I assure you it's relevant to understanding what's happening with your daughter and this bear family." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Has Lily always had this affinity for animals?" Marcus and Olivia exchanged glances. "She's always loved our dog Max," Olivia replied. "They had a special bond from the day we brought her home from the hospital." "And has she shown any other unusual abilities? Perhaps seeming to know things she shouldn't know, or communicating with animals in ways that surprise you?" Marcus frowned slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting, Director?" Harrington held up a placating hand. "I'm not suggesting anything supernatural, Mr. Cooper, but there are documented cases of individuals with extraordinary empathic abilities, particularly regarding animals. These individuals sometimes perceive distress or needs that others miss, through subtle cues most of us don't consciously register." Olivia considered this. "When Max was dying," she said slowly, "Lily knew before we did. She started spending all her time with him, bringing him her toys and blankets days before he showed any obvious symptoms. The vet later told us he must have been in pain for weeks. And today," Marcus added, warming to the subject, "she immediately recognized that the smallest cub needed different formula. How could she possibly know that?" Director Harrington nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The wildlife world occasionally encounters children with these special sensitivities. They're rare, but not unprecedented. In indigenous cultures, such children were often recognized early and trained as healers or animal communicators." "Are you saying our daughter is some kind of animal whisperer?" Marcus asked, his tone hovering between skepticism and wonder. "I'm saying your daughter appears to have an extraordinary gift for empathy and communication with animals, particularly those in distress," Harrington replied carefully. "And I believe this gift could be crucial to the rehabilitation of Moonshine and her cubs." Before either parent could respond, a soft knock at the door preceded Maya's urgent entry. "Excuse me for interrupting, but you need to come quickly. Something's happening with Moonshine." They rushed back to the surgical recovery area, where Moonshine had been transferred to a large, specially designed recovery enclosure. The bear was still sedated, but showing signs of waking, her massive head moving slightly as she began to emerge from anesthesia. "Her vital signs are spiking," Dr. Reeves explained, monitoring the readings with concern. "This is a critical period. If she wakes too agitated, she could tear her sutures or injure herself further." As they watched, Moonshine's movements became more pronounced, her massive paws twitching and her breathing quickening. The monitors showed her heart rate climbing dangerously. "We may need to sedate her again," Dr. Reeves said grimly, preparing an injection. At that moment, Lily, who had been brought from the nursery by Gerald, let out a soft cry of distress. "Ba scared," she announced, pointing at Moonshine. "Ba wants babies." Director Harrington looked at the child with newfound interest. "She's right," he said. "Moonshine is a mother separated from her cubs. Her first instinct upon waking will be to find them." "We can't bring the cubs in here," Dr. Reeves objected. "If she becomes aggressive in her disoriented state, they could be injured." "Not all of them," Gerald suggested, still holding the smallest cub wrapped in a soft blanket. "Just the one who needs her most." All eyes turned to Director Harrington, whose authority would be needed for such an unconventional approach. He considered for only a moment before nodding decisively. "Mrs. Cooper, may I suggest that you hold Lily, who in turn can hold the cub, under Gerald's guidance, of course. Position yourselves where Moonshine can see you when she first opens her eyes." "Is that safe?" Marcus asked, his protective instincts on high alert. Dr. Reeves considered the medical aspects. "Moonshine is still partially sedated and secured in the recovery enclosure. The risk is minimal, especially given what we've already witnessed of her behavior around Lily." After a brief family conference conducted in urgent whispers, the Coopers agreed. Olivia sat in a chair, positioned carefully near the enclosure but outside the safety barriers. Lily settled in her lap, and Gerald gently placed the tiny cub in the child's arms, showing her how to support it properly. "Everyone else, please step back," Director Harrington instructed. "Dr. Reeves, stay ready with the sedative, but let's see what happens." The room fell into tense silence as Moonshine's movements became more pronounced. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, her dark eyes unfocused. Then her gaze settled on Lily, who sat perfectly still, cradling the smallest cub. A change came over the bear's massive form. The tension seemed to drain away, and the alarming beeps of the monitors slowed to a more regular rhythm. Moonshine made a soft huffing sound, a mother recognizing her child. "Talk to her, Lily," Olivia whispered, her arms secure around her daughter. "Tell her it's okay." Lily needed no prompting. "Bah," she said clearly. "Bah, better now, baby better too." She held the cub where Moonshine could see it, the tiny creature now awake and making soft whimpering sounds of its own. Moonshine's response was immediate and clear. She relaxed fully, her eyes never leaving her cub and the small human holding it. The monitors showed her vital signs stabilizing completely. "Incredible," Dr. Reeves breathed, lowering the syringe she had prepared. "She's completely calm. This defies everything we know about wild bear behavior during recovery." Director Harrington watched with fascination. "Perhaps not everything we know," he corrected softly. "Just everything we remember." For the next hour they maintained this unusual vigil, Lily holding the cub where Moonshine could see them both, occasionally speaking in her childish mixture of English and what sounded almost like bear cub vocalizations. Moonshine remained calm, her recovery proceeding better than anyone had dared hope. When at last the bear's eyes began to close again, this time in natural sleep rather than anesthesia, Dr. Reeves indicated they could move away. "This is a good sign," she explained, as Gerald carefully took the cub back from Lily. "Natural sleep will help her heal faster than sedation." Once they had left the recovery area, Director Harrington invited the family to his office. A warm, wood-paneled room filled with books, artifacts from around the world, and framed photographs of Harrington with various wild animals. "What we witness today is extraordinarily rare," he began, settling behind his desk after ensuring the Coopers were comfortably seated. "But not, as I suggested earlier, unprecedented." He opened a drawer and removed an old leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. My grandfather was a wildlife veterinarian in East Africa during the colonial era, he explained, handling the book with reverence. He documented similar cases, individuals who could communicate with animals in ways that defied conventional explanation. He turned the journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Here's an account from 1932 about a Maasai child who could calm injured elephants when no one else could approach them. And here, he turned several pages, a case from 1945 of a young boy in what is now Tanzania who helped rehabilitate a family of cheetahs. Are you saying this is genetic? Marcus asked, struggling to process these revelations. Not necessarily genetic, Harrington clarified, more like a rare perceptual gift. Some people can see colors others can't, or hear frequencies beyond the normal human range. Your daughter appears to perceive and interpret animal communications in ways most humans have lost the ability to do. Olivia looked at Lily, who was contentedly playing with the stuffed animal Harrington had provided, seemingly unaware of the extraordinary discussion taking place. But she's so young. How can she possibly understand what the bears need? Children's brains are remarkably plastic, Harrington explained. They haven't yet formed the rigid categories and assumptions that limit adult perception. It's possible that Lily is simply listening in ways the rest of us have forgotten how to do. What does this mean for her future? Marcus asked, the weight of parental concern evident in his voice. Director Harrington leaned forward, his expression earnest. That's entirely up to you as her parents, but I would like to propose something that might benefit everyone involved, especially Moonshine and her cubs. He outlined a proposal. The family would visit the Rehabilitation Center regularly over the coming weeks, allowing Lily to be present during critical phases of Moonshine's recovery and the cubs' development. The center's staff would document these interactions, adding to their scientific understanding of wildlife rehabilitation. In exchange, the center would provide the family with resources to help them understand and nurture Lily's unusual gift. We wouldn't publicize her involvement, of course, Harrington assured them. Her privacy and safety are paramount, but the knowledge we gain could help save countless animal lives in the future. Marcus and Olivia again shared one of their silent communications, years of marriage allowing them to convey complex thoughts with just a glance. We need time to think about this, Marcus finally said. It's a lot to process. Of course, Harrington agreed readily. Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll consider it. For the bears, for the advancement of wildlife rehabilitation, and for Lily herself. Gifts like hers often wither without proper nurturing. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Reeves approached with an update. Moonshine is resting comfortably, and all 3 cubs are now stable, including the smallest one, who's shown remarkable improvement since Lily fed her. Does that mean they'll all survive? Olivia asked hopefully. Dr. Reeves smiled, the exhaustion of the day evident in the lines around her eyes. In medicine, human or veterinary, we never make absolute promises, but I'm cautiously optimistic, and I believe your daughter played a crucial role in that prognosis. As they walked to their car, Lily, now drowsy in her father's arms, as the extraordinary day caught up with her, Olivia found herself looking at the world differently. The trees seemed more alive somehow, the birds' songs more meaningful, the very air charged with communications she had never before thought to listen for. What do we do now? She asked Marcus as he carefully buckled their sleeping daughter into her car seat. He looked up at the Rehabilitation Center where Moonshine and her cubs were beginning their long journey toward recovery and eventual return to the wild. I think, he said slowly, we start by listening. To Lily, to the animals, to whatever this gift of hers is trying to teach us. Olivia nodded, reaching out to brush a curl from Lily's peaceful face. As she did, her daughter stirred slightly and murmured in her sleep, a sound that was neither fully human nor fully bear, but something in between. A sound that spoke of ancient connections and forgotten languages, of bridges between worlds that most adults could no longer see, but that remained perfectly clear to the innocent eyes of a child. In the days and weeks that followed, the Cooper family would return to the Rehabilitation Center many times. They would witness Moonshine's gradual return to health and strength, her reunion with all 3 cubs, including the smallest one, now thriving, and eventually the family's successful release back into the protected wilderness where they belonged. And throughout it all, little Lily would serve as an interpreter of sorts, a tiny ambassador between species, her gift bringing tears to the eyes of hardened wildlife veterans and changing forever how the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center approached its healing mission. News of the remarkable case spread through professional circles, though the identity of the child involved was kept strictly confidential. Director Harrington presented the findings at international conferences, where the implications for wildlife rehabilitation sparked intense interest and debate. For the Cooper family, life would never quite return to normal. Lily's gift continued to manifest in new and sometimes challenging ways. The neighborhood dogs that followed her home from the park, the injured robin she found and nursed back to health with unexpected expertise, the way she sometimes tilted her head as if listening to voices no one else could hear. But they learned to embrace this extraordinary aspect of their daughter, to nurture it while still ensuring she had all the normal experiences of childhood. And whenever they visited the edge of the Black Ridge Mountains, they would sometimes glimpse a black bear with a distinctive crescent marking, watching from a respectful distance, a wild creature who had briefly bridged the gap between worlds, and in doing so, reminded a group of humans that some connections transcend the boundaries we believe to be fixed and immutable. And in those moments, little Lily would always smile and wave, sometimes calling out a greeting in her special language, the one she had learned on that remarkable day when a dying mother bear had begged for help, and found it in the compassionate heart of a child too young to know that such things were supposed to be impossible. Years later, when Lily had grown into a young woman studying wildlife biology at university, she would often return to that spot in the forest where she first made her extraordinary connection. On one such visit, as the autumn leaves painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, she found a single black bear claw, shed naturally and left conspicuously on a flat rock near the Cooper family's property line. Beside it lay a perfectly formed pine cone, as if placed there with deliberate care. Lily knew immediately it was Moonshine's final gift. Wildlife officers had reported that the bear with the crescent moon marking had not been seen for several months, and at her advanced age had likely passed peacefully in the wilderness she called home. Clutching these treasures to her heart, Lily sat beneath the ancient oak tree where everything had begun, and let her tears flow freely, not just for Moonshine, but for the precious gift their connection had brought to the world. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, the Cooper family gathered on their porch. Now, in their 50s, Marcus and Olivia watched with pride as their daughter shared stories of her latest wildlife rehabilitation successes with her younger brother Max, named after the golden retriever who had started it all. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I think about that day with Moonshine, I still can't fully explain what happened, but I know it changed us all forever." "It taught us to listen," Olivia replied, squeezing his hand. "To really listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts." Lily smiled, the bear claw and pine cone now fashioned into a pendant that hung around her neck. "Moonshine showed us that sometimes the most important connections cross boundaries we never knew could be crossed. As if in response, a chorus of wolf howls rose from the distant mountains, and closer, the hoot of an owl taking flight. For a moment, it seemed the entire forest was offering its voice to their conversation. "I think," Lily said softly, "that we forget something essential as we grow up, that we're not separate from nature but part of it. Every creature speaks if we're willing to hear. Every heart understands compassion, regardless of species, and sometimes it takes a child and a mother bear to remind us of what we've always known deep inside." She touched her pendant, a connection to an extraordinary friendship that defied explanation. Moonshine came to us because she knew, somehow, that love transcends barriers, that when we look at another living being with genuine compassion, miraculous things can happen. The family fell silent, absorbing this wisdom as the stars began to appear overhead. In that moment of quiet reflection, they felt connected not just to each other but to something larger, the intricate web of life that binds all creatures together in ways that science alone cannot fully explain. And somewhere in the darkening forest, 3 healthy young bears, Moonshine's grand cubs, moved silently through the trees, occasionally pausing to look toward the lights of the Cooper home with curious, intelligent eyes. The legacy continued, a reminder that when we open our hearts to the natural world, it opens itself to us in return. This is the true miracle of compassion, that a single act of kindness, offered without expectation or limitation, can ripple outward to touch countless lives. Just as a sick mother bear once trusted a human baby with her most precious possession, her vulnerable cubs, we too can trust in the power of empathy to bridge seemingly impossible divides. For in the end, it is not the boundaries between us that define our world, but the connections that transcend them. Connections forged in moments of pure, unbridled compassion when we recognize ourselves in the eyes of another, no matter how different they may seem on the surface. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all, that we are never truly separate, never truly alone. We are all part of the same magnificent story, bound together by the universal language of love that even the youngest child and the wildest creature can understand.